An exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She was 19. He was twice her age, with a past connected to her mother. What began as a paid dinner turned into a forbidden, intense, and dangerous romance. When desire crosses the boundaries of morality, someone always gets hurt. The rain hammered against the windows of the coffee shop like impatient fingers, and Emily Carter wiped the same table for the third time, lost in thoughts she shouldn't be having during her shift. It was almost 11 on a Monday night in Chicago, and Bourbon Cafe was practically empty, except for 2 college students pretending to study while flirting, and a middle-aged man who had been drinking black coffee for 2 hours without exchanging a word with anyone. Emily observed her reflection in the foggy glass. At 19, she carried on her shoulders the weight of a much older woman. Her dark hair fell in rebellious waves to her waist, while her honey-colored eyes seemed to always question the world around her. She had inherited from her mother a quiet beauty and the same delicate necklace she never took off, an antique piece with a small anchor pendant that shone discreetly under the yellowish lights of the cafe. "Emily, can you close up alone tonight?" The manager's raspy voice pulled her from her daydreams. "My daughter has a fever, and I need to pick her up from school." "Of course, Mrs. Fisher. Go ahead." Alone with the last customers, Emily allowed herself to think about what awaited her at home. The small rented room downtown, where she shared the space with piles of overdue bills and the smell of her grandmother's medications. Margaret Carter, at 72, was losing the battle against her own mind, and the psychiatric treatment cost more than Emily could afford with 2 jobs. The bell on the door rang, and she looked up, ready to inform the customer they were closing. But the words died in her throat. The man who entered was different from anyone who frequented Bourbon Cafe. Tall, elegant, with salt-and-pepper hair combed back, and eyes of such an intense blue they seemed to pierce the soul of anyone who met them. He wore a dark overcoat that dripped rainwater, and when he approached the counter, Emily caught the subtle scent of an expensive cologne mixed with the aroma of old books. "Pardon the late hour," he said, with a deep voice that seemed to carry secrets. "I know you're closing, but I'd like to speak with Emily Carter." Her heart raced. Nobody ever looked for her by her full name. Nobody knew who she was beyond her co-workers and her grandmother. "That's me," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can I help you with something?" He studied her face for a moment that seemed eternal, as if searching for something familiar in her features. Then he removed an elegant card from the inside pocket of his overcoat and placed it on the counter. Her name is Nathan Hayes. I have a proposal for you." Emily picked up the card with trembling fingers. The paper was thick, high quality, with gold-embossed lettering. "Art restoration and curation, private collections." "What kind of proposal?" she asked, unable to hide the suspicion in her voice. Nathan tilted his head slightly, a gesture that could be interpreted as courtesy or condescension. "I need someone for occasional dinners. Nothing more than that. Someone who knows how to listen without judging, who has enough presence to fill the silence of a house too big for one person." The words sounded strange, almost rehearsed, but there was something in the way he pronounced them that made Emily shiver. It wasn't desire. She detected in his eyes but something deeper and more disturbing. Recognition. "I don't understand." "Why me?" "Because you have what I'm looking for," he answered without hesitation, "and because I imagine you need the money." The frankness of the observation irritated her, but he wasn't wrong. Emily bit her lower lip, a habit she'd had since childhood when feeling cornered. "How much?" $1,000 per dinner, payment in advance." Emily almost dropped the card. $1,000 was more than half of what she earned working the entire month, between the coffee shop and the cleaning jobs she did on weekends. "And what exactly do you expect in return?" Nathan smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the expression of someone who had already anticipated the question. "That you show up, that you wear something elegant, that you eat the food I prepare for you, and that you listen when I want to talk. Nothing more. No inappropriate touching, no obscure contracts, no promises that neither of us intends to keep." There was something almost melancholic in the way he spoke about promises, as if he had learned not to make any a long time ago. Emily looked around the coffee shop. The college students had left, leaving only her and the man with the black coffee, who was now observing her with poorly disguised curiosity. The life she knew was small, predictable, and suffocating. Every day was the same. Wake up before sunrise, prepare her grandmother's breakfast, rush to her first job, eat a sandwich for lunch between commitments, work until late, return home and repeat it all the next day. "Why should I trust you?" she finally asked. "You shouldn't," Nathan replied with brutal honesty. "But sometimes life offers us strange opportunities, and we have to decide if we prefer the safety of familiar misery or the risk of the unknown." He removed a sealed envelope from his pocket and placed it next to the card. $1,000. The dinner would be tomorrow at 8 o'clock. If you change your mind, you can keep the money anyway. I won't come after you to collect it. Emily picked up the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy, and she could feel the volume of the bills through the paper. Where? Nathan wrote an address on the back of his own card. A wealthy area of the city, where houses were hidden behind high walls and electronic gates. "One last thing," he said, already heading for the door. "You don't need to dress up in any special way. You're already exactly what I'm looking for." And before Emily could respond, he disappeared into the rain, leaving only the scent of his cologne and a strange feeling that her life had changed forever. Alone in the coffee shop, Emily tore open the envelope with impatient fingers. The bills were new, smelled of fresh ink, and were more money than she had held in her hands her entire life. $1,000, enough to pay for 3 months of her grandmother's medications, enough to settle the overdue rent, enough to buy a decent dress and perhaps, for the first time in years, feel like a real woman. But there was something in Nathan Hayes' eyes that troubled her, the way he had studied her, as if he already knew her from somewhere, the way he talked about broken promises, and mainly the disturbing feeling that he knew exactly who she was, even before stepping into the coffee shop. Emily closed the establishment on autopilot, tucked the money into her purse, and walked through the wet streets toward the bus stop. The nighttime city of Chicago pulsed around her with its usual chaotic energy, but she felt disconnected from everything, as if she were watching her own life from the outside. On the nearly empty bus, as the city lights passed by the foggy window, Emily thought about her mother. Olivia Carter had disappeared when she was only 7, leaving behind only the necklace that Emily now wore, and a photograph where she appeared next to a man whose face was always in shadow. Grandmother Margaret. Never wanted to talk about it, limiting herself to saying that Olivia was a complicated woman who got involved with the wrong people. But what if it wasn't exactly like that? What if there was more to her mother's story than her grandmother was willing to tell? Emily got off the bus 2 blocks before her usual stop and walked slowly through the deserted downtown streets. She needed to think, needed to understand why a rich and mysterious man like Nathan Hayes would seek her out specifically for paid dinners. It didn't make sense. She wasn't especially beautiful, didn't have refined formal education, didn't possess anything that could interest someone of his social position, unless it was something else, unless he really knew her from somewhere. The building where she lived was an old townhouse converted into tiny studio apartments. Emily climbed the 3 flights of stairs, avoiding stepping on the creaky steps, and opened the apartment door carefully so as not to wake her grandmother. Margaret Carter was sitting in the worn armchair, still dressed in her nightgown, staring fixedly at the turned-off television. In recent months, the episodes of mental confusion had become more frequent, and it was common to find her like this, lost somewhere between the present and memories. "Grandma," Emily approached slowly. "How was your day?" Margaret turned her head slowly, and for a moment her eyes seemed not to recognize her granddaughter. Then, as if a curtain had been lifted, she smiled. "Emily, my dear, you're late today." "Work, Grandma. You know how it is." Emily helped her grandmother get up and led her to the bed. As she helped her lie down, Margaret held her wrist with surprising strength. "She left to protect you," she murmured, with her eyes fixed on the necklace Emily wore. "Your mother." She knew he would come looking. Emily's heart raced. Margaret. Rarely talked about Olivia, and when she did, it was always in a vague and confused way. Who, Grandma? Who would come looking? But Margaret had already closed her eyes, and her breathing became deep and regular. Emily stayed there for a few minutes, observing her grandmother's wrinkled face, looking for signs that she was still conscious. But Margaret had sunk into sleep, leaving only another enigmatic clue about the past Emily so wanted to uncover. Alone in the small bedroom, Emily took Nathan's card from her pocket and examined it again. The paper was of exceptional quality, the type used by people who never had to worry about money. The address was in an area she knew only in passing, when she took buses to occasional jobs in wealthy neighborhoods. $1,000 for a dinner, just to be present and listen. It was too much money for something so simple. And Emily had learned in her 19 years of life that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually hid some catch. But what if it didn't? What if it was just the opportunity she needed to change her life? Emily put the card in the dresser drawer next to the only photograph she had of her mother. In the faded image, Olivia smiled at the camera while a man with his back turned adjusted something on a frame on the wall. Emily had never been able to see his face, but had always wondered who he might be. The father she never knew, a boyfriend, a friend. For the first time, looking at the photo, Emily noticed something that had gone unnoticed all these years. In the reflection of the glass frame that the man was adjusting, it was possible to see part of his profile, an aristocratic profile, with a strong chin and straight nose. A profile that vaguely resembled Nathan Hayes's. Emily approached the window and looked at the city below. Chicago never completely slept, and even at that hour there were still cars on the streets and lights on in the buildings. Someone, somewhere, was living a life different from hers. Someone had enough money not to worry about overdue bills. Someone could pay $1,000 just to have company during dinner. And maybe, just maybe, that someone had the answers she was looking for about her own past. Emily took the envelope with the money and hid it inside her pillow. Tomorrow, she would buy a dress. Tomorrow she would have dinner at a stranger's house. Tomorrow she would discover what Nathan Hayes really wanted from her. Because one thing she knew for certain, men like him didn't seek out girls like her without a very specific reason. And Emily was determined to discover what that reason was, even if it meant entering a game whose rules she didn't yet understand. Before sleeping, she touched the necklace on her neck and whispered a silent promise to the mother who had departed. So long ago, "I'll discover the truth, Mom, about you, about me, about everything they've hidden from us." And in the darkness of the small room, with the rain still beating against the window, Emily Carter fell asleep for the last time as the woman she had always been. Because, without knowing it, tomorrow she would begin to become someone completely different. Emily spent the entire day thinking about backing out. She woke up with her stomach in knots, showered 3 times and changed outfits more than a dozen times before deciding on a simple black dress she had bought at a downtown store. It wasn't exactly elegant, but it was the best her budget allowed, and it accentuated her figure without being vulgar. At 7 in the evening, she was at the bus stop, hands sweating inside her purse, where she kept the card with the address. Grandmother Margaret had spent the entire day murmuring disconnected things about dangerous men and ghosts from the past, which didn't help Emily's nervousness at all. The journey to the wealthy neighborhood took almost an hour, and with each passing minute, Emily convinced herself she was making a monumental mistake. But it was too late to turn back. The money had already been spent on medications for her grandmother and on the payment of 2 overdue rent installments. When she finally got off the bus on the main avenue, Emily had to walk 15 more minutes through tree-lined streets where houses were hidden behind high walls and imposing gates. The contrast with downtown was stark. Here everything was quiet, organized, protected. The kind of place where people lived entire lives without ever having to worry about money. The address Nathan had given corresponded to a colonial-style mansion, painted white with dark wood details. The iron gate was artistically worked, and through the bars, Emily could see a meticulously tended garden, with century-old trees and a stone path that led to the main entrance. She took a deep breath and rang the bell. The sound echoed for a few seconds before a deep voice answered through the intercom. "Emily?" "Yes, I'm here." The gate opened with an electronic buzz, and Emily walked through the garden, trying not to show how impressed she was. She had never set foot in a place like this. The flowers were perfectly aligned, the shrubs trimmed with surgical precision, and there were small sculptures scattered throughout the lawn that looked like they had come from a museum. Nathan was waiting for her at the house door. He had traded the dark overcoat for a navy blue dress shirt and tailored pants, but maintained the same mysterious aura from the night before. When she approached, he gestured for her to enter, and Emily found herself in the most elegant entrance hall she had ever seen in her life. The ceiling was high with crystal chandeliers that projected golden light onto walls covered with paintings Emily didn't recognize but which looked expensive. There were marble staircases leading to the second floor, and on the floor a Persian rug that probably cost more than she earned in a year. "Welcome," said Nathan, closing the door behind her. "May I take your purse?" Emily hesitated before handing over the simple purse, suddenly feeling self-conscious about its simplicity amid so much opulence. "Your house is impressive," she murmured, unable to hide the amazement in her voice. "Thank you. Shall we go to the dining room? The food should be ready." He led her down a long corridor, flanked by more paintings and sculptures. Emily noticed that many of the works seemed old, some with obvious signs of restoration. There were paintings with faded colors, sculptures with small, expertly repaired cracks, and pieces that gave the impression of having been rescued from abandoned places. "Do you restore all of this?" she asked, stopping in front of a painting that showed a dark-haired woman looking at the sea. Nathan stopped beside her, and Emily felt the heat of his presence like an electric wave. "Some pieces, yes. Others I just preserve." There was something in the way he pronounced the word preserve that made Emily shiver, as if he wasn't talking only about art. The dining room was even more impressive than the entrance hall. A solid wood table occupied the center of the room, set for two people with fine china, crystal glasses and lit candles that created an intimate and almost romantic atmosphere. The walls were covered with shelves full of old books, and at the back of the room there was a lit fireplace that warmed the environment. "Please, sit down," said Nathan, pulling out a chair for her. Emily settled in, trying not to appear out of place while he served red wine in their glasses. The liquid was as dark as blood and had a complex aroma that she had never experienced. "I don't drink much," she confessed when he offered the glass. "No need to worry. It's just a Bordeaux. It goes well with the main course." Nathan disappeared for a few minutes and returned with elegantly prepared plates. The food looked like it had come from an expensive restaurant. Filet mignon in wine sauce, perfectly grilled vegetables, and a saffron rice that exhaled a delicious aroma. "You cook?" Emily asked, impressed. "I learned out of necessity. When you live alone for a long time, you either learn to cook well or resign yourself to eating poorly for the rest of your life." They began to eat in silence, and Emily was surprised by the quality of the food. Each forkful was an explosion of flavors she had never experienced. The wine, initially bitter, became smoother with each sip, warming her body and relaxing her tense muscles. "How long have you lived alone?" she asked when curiosity became stronger than shyness. Nathan chewed slowly before answering, as if weighing each word. 20 years, maybe more." "Never married?" "No." The answer was dry, definitive, but Emily detected a subtle pain in his eyes. There was something there, a wound that had never completely healed. "And you?" he asked, changing the focus of the conversation. "Have you always lived with your grandmother?" "Since I was 7. My mother left when I was a child." "Left?" Emily hesitated. It was a conversation she rarely had with strangers, but something in the environment, in the wine, in the attentive way Nathan listened to her, made her continue. "Disappeared. One day she was there, the next day she was gone. She left only a letter saying it was better that way, that she was protecting me from something. Nathan stopped eating and fixed his eyes on her with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably in her chair. How old was your mother when this happened? 26 years old. I know, because I saw it on her birth certificate. And what was her name? Emily felt a chill down her spine. Why was he so interested in the details about her mother? Olivia. Olivia Carter. The name seemed to provoke a reaction in Nathan. He remained motionless for a few seconds, the wineglass suspended in the air, his eyes fixed on some distant point in the room. Olivia, he repeated, almost whispering. Beautiful name. Do you know someone with that name? Nathan resumed, drinking, avoiding her gaze. I did. A long time ago. Emily felt her heart race. There was something there, a connection she couldn't fully understand. What was she like? Beautiful, intense, complicated. He paused. Similar to you. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Emily realized her hands were trembling slightly as she held the wineglass. Why did you seek me out? She finally asked the question that had been tormenting her since the night before. Nathan got up and walked to one of the bookshelves. He removed an old volume and leafed through it slowly, as if looking for something specific. Because sometimes the past finds us, even when we try to run from it, he answered, without turning to her. And because some debts can only be paid with time. What debts? He closed the book and finally turned with an expression that mixed melancholy and something that could be regret. Unfulfilled promises, unspoken words, people we leave too soon. Emily stood up as well, feeling a mixture of curiosity and fear growing inside her. You knew my mother, she said, not as a question, but as a statement. Nathan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked to the fireplace and stood watching the flames dance. I knew a woman named Olivia a long time ago, a woman who carried secrets too heavy for her delicate shoulders. Was it her? I don't know. Maybe. Coincidences are sometimes just coincidences. But Emily knew he was lying. There was something in the way he had pronounced her mother's name, in the way he had studied her when she talked about the past. Nathan Hayes knew Olivia Carter, and this was no coincidence. What happened to her? Nathan returned to the table and refilled their wineglasses. His movements were precise, controlled, but Emily noticed that his hands weren't completely steady. The Olivia I knew disappeared one day. No explanations, no goodbyes. She left only a note saying she loved me, but that leaving was the only way to protect me. Nathan put the photographs back in the box. I never saw her again. The words echoed in Emily's mind like a painful echo. It was exactly what had happened to her. Did you love her? The question came out before she could contain herself, and Emily immediately regretted it. It was too intimate, too personal for someone she had just met. But Nathan didn't seem offended. Instead, he smiled sadly. I was young. I thought love was enough to overcome any obstacle. I learned in the worst possible way that it's not. Emily drank more wine, feeling the alcohol warm her body and make her thoughts more confused. There were so many questions she wanted to ask, so many connections she needed to understand. Why did you bring me here? If you knew my mother, if you had something, why are you doing this to me? Nathan approached her, and Emily could smell his masculine cologne mixed with the aroma of wine and firewood. He was tall, much taller than she was, and when he spoke his voice sounded dangerously low. Because some people leave marks that never disappear, and because when I saw you in that coffee shop, it was as if 20 years had dissolved in a second. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something dangerous in those words, an intensity that both attracted and frightened her. This isn't right, she murmured, taking a step back. If you knew my mother, if you had some kind of relationship with her. I know, interrupted Nathan. I know it's complicated. I know it's wrong in many ways. But I also know I couldn't live with the regret of not trying to understand what this means. He approached again, and this time Emily didn't back away. She could feel the warmth emanating from his body, could see the details of his blue eyes that seemed to hold so many secrets. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe just to understand. Maybe to find a way, to make peace with the past." Emily raised her hand and touched the necklace on her neck, an instinctive gesture she made whenever she felt lost. Nathan followed the movement with his eyes, and his expression changed instantly. "Where did you get that?" "It was my mother's, the only thing she left for me." Nathan extended his hand slowly, as if asking permission to touch the piece. Emily nodded almost imperceptibly, and when his fingers brushed her skin as he manipulated the necklace, she felt an electric discharge course through her entire body. "This necklace," he murmured, examining the anchor-shaped pendant. "I gave this necklace to someone a long time ago." Emily felt the world spin around her. Nathan's words echoed in her mind like a distant echo, and suddenly everything made sense. The way he had sought her out, the interest in details about her mother, the way he studied her as if looking for something familiar in her features. "You—" she began, but the words died in her throat. Nathan released the necklace and stepped back, running his hands through his salt and pepper hair. "I shouldn't have brought you here. This was a mistake." "No," said Emily, with more firmness than she expected from herself. "It wasn't a mistake. I need to know the truth about my mother, about you, about what happened between you." They stared at each other for long seconds, and Emily felt she was on the verge of discovering something that would change her life forever. Nathan seemed to be fighting with himself, as if debating between telling the truth or keeping the secrets buried. Finally, he sighed and went to one of the shelves, from which he removed an old wooden box. He returned to Emily and opened the box, revealing yellowed photographs, letters tied with ribbon and small personal objects. "Olivia Carter was the great love of my life," he said, picking up one of the photographs. "We met when she was 22 and I was 28. She worked in an art gallery downtown, and I was a young restorer trying to build a career." He offered the photograph to Emily, and she almost dropped it when she saw the image. It was her, mother exactly as she remembered her, but younger, smiling radiantly beside a man who was unequivocally Nathan, just 20 years younger. "You dated?" "For 4 years. We talked about marriage, about building a family together. I thought nothing could separate us." Emily turned the photograph and saw a date scribbled in pencil, March 2003, 2 years before she was born. What happened? Nathan picked up another photograph, this one showing Olivia alone, looking pensively at the camera. There was something different in her eyes, a sadness that Emily hadn't seen in the first image. She began to change, became distant, nervous, said there were people looking for her, that she had made mistakes in the past that could harm us. I tried to help, offered protection, said we would face any problem together. But she didn't accept. One morning I woke up and she had disappeared. She left only a note saying she loved me, but that leaving was the only way to protect me. Nathan put the photographs back in the box. I never saw her again. Emily felt tears burning her eyes. The story Nathan was telling was very similar to what had happened to her, but it also revealed a side of her mother she had never known. Was she pregnant when she left? The question came out as a whisper, but Nathan heard it clearly. He closed his eyes and nodded slowly. I suspected at the time. There were signs, nausea, mood swings, a different way of touching her belly, but she always denied it when I asked. Emily let herself fall into the chair, her legs too shaky to support her. The pieces of the puzzle of her life were beginning to fit together, forming an image she had never imagined. "Do you think I'm—" "I don't know," interrupted Nathan, but his eyes said otherwise. "The dates coincide. The physical resemblance is undeniable. And this necklace—" He touched the pendant on her neck again. "I bought it in an antique store and told Olivia it represented our anchor, what kept us united even in storms." Emily touched her face, feeling the tears flow silently. For 19 years she had wondered about her origin, about the father she had never known. And now, in the most unexpected way possible, she might have found the answer. "What do we just do now?" she asked with a choked voice. Nathan knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. They were strong hands, calloused from work with art, but also gentle. I don't know. This is more complicated than either of us could imagine. Emily raised her eyes and met his, blue like the deep sea, full of an old pain, but also something new, something that made her feel alive in a way she had never experienced. I want to know the truth, she said with more determination than she felt. The whole truth, about my mother, about you, about me. Nathan nodded slowly. Then you'll come back tomorrow? For another dinner? Emily hesitated. She knew she was entering dangerous territory, where normal rules didn't apply. But she also knew she couldn't live without discovering what had really happened between Nathan and her mother. Yes, she answered. I'll come back. And when he smiled, for the first time since they had met, Emily felt her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Emily spent the next 3 days in a constant state of agitation. She couldn't concentrate on work, stumbled over words when customers made simple orders, and at night stayed awake for hours reviewing every detail of the conversation with Nathan. The possibility that he might be her biological father should have completely repelled her, but the effect was, paradoxically, the opposite. She caught herself thinking about him constantly, remembering how his blue eyes fixed on her, the deep timbre of his voice, the warmth she felt when he approached. It was wrong. It was disturbing in every way, but it was also the only real clue she had about her origin, and Emily discovered she was willing to follow this clue wherever it led her, regardless of the consequences. On Thursday, she called the number Nathan had written on the back of the card. Can I come tonight? She asked, without preamble. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Emily could hear the muffled sound of pages being turned as if he were reading. Of course. Same time? Yes. Emily. His voice sounded hesitant. Are you sure you want to continue with this? After what we talked about, maybe it's better. I'm sure, she interrupted with more firmness than she felt. I need answers. This time, Emily didn't spend as much time getting ready. She wore the same outfit from the previous dinner and caught the bus with a determination she hadn't felt in years. There was something liberating in knowing her life was changing, even if she didn't know exactly where it was headed. Nathan was waiting for her at the door, but his expression was different. There was a tension in his shoulders, a rigidity that hadn't been present the first time. He greeted her politely and led her to the dining room, but Emily noticed he avoided looking her directly in the eyes. Are you okay? She asked as he served the wine. I've spent the last few days thinking if I did the right thing by telling you about your mother. Emily took a sip of the wine, the same Bordeaux from the night before, and studied his face. Nathan looked older, as if the 3 days that had passed had weighed years upon his shoulders. And did you reach any conclusion? That maybe some secrets should remain buried. The answer irritated her. After a lifetime of unanswered questions, she had finally found someone who could clarify her past, and now he wanted to back away. That's easy to say when you know the whole story, she replied with a harshness in her voice that surprised him. I spent 19 years not knowing where I came from, who my father is, why my mother disappeared. You can't just give me a clue and then decide you don't want to talk about it anymore. Nathan placed the glass on the table and finally faced her. There was something tortured in his expression, as if he were fighting an internal battle. You're right. It's unfair of me. He sighed deeply. What do you want to know? Emily had prepared a mental list of questions over the last few days, but now that she had the opportunity, she felt lost about where to begin. Tell me about her. About how you were together. Nathan got up and walked to one of the shelves, from which he retrieved an old photo album. He returned to the table and opened it, revealing pages filled with images that documented a relationship that seemed to have been genuinely happy. We met at an art exhibition, he began, pointing to a photo where he appeared next to Olivia, in front of a modern sculpture. She worked in organizing the event, and I was there to evaluate some pieces that needed restoration. Emily studied the image. Her mother wore a light blue dress and smiled radiantly, with a joy that Emily had never seen in her few childhood memories. She looks happy. She was, at least in the beginning. Nathan turned the page showing more photographs. Olivia had a unique way of seeing the world. She could find beauty in things most people would consider ordinary. Once she spent an entire hour photographing cracks in an old wall, saying each fissure told a story. There was affection in the way he talked about Olivia, but also a deep sadness that permeated every word. When did things start to change? Nathan hesitated before turning a few more pages. The subsequent photos showed Olivia progressively more serious, less spontaneous. In some images, she seemed to be looking over her shoulder, as if she expected to be followed. She started receiving strange phone calls, people who asked for her using names I had never heard. When I questioned her, she said they were wrong numbers, but I could tell she was lying. What kind of names? Marina. Bianca. As if she had lived other lives before. Meeting me. Emily felt a shiver. Grandmother Margaret sometimes called her by strange names during her episodes of confusion, and Emily had always assumed it was just part of the dementia. Did you ever investigate? I tried. I hired a private detective, but he found nothing. It was as if Olivia Carter had emerged from nowhere at 20. There were no records of school, previous jobs, nothing that indicated a life before appearing in Chicago. Nathan closed the album and set it aside, as if the images were too painful to continue viewing. In the end, she told me there were people from her past who could harm us, that staying with me was putting us both in danger. And you believed her? At the time I thought it was paranoia. Olivia was always intense, dramatic. I thought she was creating problems where none existed. He paused. Only after she disappeared did I begin to wonder if I should have taken her fears more seriously. Emily drank more wine, feeling the alcohol relax her tense muscles. There were so many pieces of the puzzle that still didn't fit. Why do you think she had me? If she was running from something, why decide to have a child? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Nathan remained silent for long seconds, absently stirring his wineglass. Maybe because you were the only good thing she could leave behind. Or maybe because deep down she hoped that having a child would force her to stop running. But it didn't. No, apparently whatever she was running from was stronger than her love for you. The words hurt, even coming from someone who wasn't to blame for her mother's mistakes. Emily had always wondered if Olivia had abandoned her, because she didn't love her enough, and hearing this possibility verbalized brought to the surface an old pain she thought she had overcome. "I'm sorry," said Nathan, realizing the effect of his words. "I didn't mean to. It's okay. I always knew she had her reasons. I just wish I understood what they were." Nathan got up and went to a small side table, from which he took a bottle of whiskey and 2 lowball glasses. "Want to try something stronger?" Emily nodded, although she rarely drank spirits. Nathan served 2 generous portions and offered a glass to her. "To the memory of Olivia Carter," he toasted, raising his glass. "A woman who loved deeply and suffered in silence." They drank, and Emily felt the whiskey burn her throat, leaving a trail of heat that descended to her stomach. It was a strange sensation, but not unpleasant. "Can I see the rest of the house?" she asked after a few minutes of contemplative silence. Nathan seemed surprised by the request, but nodded. "Sure. Where would you like to start?" "Your studio." "Where you work?" He led her down a corridor that led to the back of the house, passing through more elegantly decorated rooms. The studio was in an area that had originally been a garage, but had been converted into an impressive workspace. There were easels scattered throughout the room, tables covered with brushes, paints, and solvents, and various works in different stages of restoration. "This is where the magic happens," said Nathan, turning on special lights that illuminated the room with an almost clinical clarity. Emily walked among the pieces, impressed by his skill. There were paintings that seemed to have been completely destroyed by time, but were being carefully brought back to life. Cracked sculptures that had been repaired with such expertise that the mends were almost imperceptible. "How did you learn to do this?" "I studied in Europe when I was young. Florence, Paris, London. I spent years learning techniques that were passed down through generations of craftsmen." Emily stopped in front of an easel covered by a white cloth. "And is this also a restoration?" Nathan tensed immediately. That is a personal project, but Emily had already noticed a corner of canvas that escaped from the cloth, and there was something familiar in the brushstroke, in the color palette she could glimpse. "May I see?" "Emily, I don't think—" But she had already pulled the cloth, revealing an unfinished painting that made her take a step back, her heart racing. It was a dark-haired woman, painted in profile, looking at a window through which the sea was visible. And around the figure's neck, painted with meticulous detail, was the same necklace that Emily was wearing at that moment. "My God," she whispered, instinctively bringing her hand to her own neck. Nathan approached slowly, as if fearing her reaction. "I started painting right after she disappeared. I never managed to finish it." Emily studied the painting more closely. The technique was masterful, each brushstroke placed with precision, but there was an almost obsessive quality to the work, as if the artist had tried to capture not just the image, but the very essence of the person portrayed. "It's my mother." "Yes. You painted her from memory?" "Mainly, but I also used some photographs as reference." Emily gently touched the canvas, feeling the texture of the layers of paint. "Why did you never finish it?" Nathan remained silent for so long that Emily began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with an old pain. "Because finishing would mean accepting that she was gone forever. As long as the painting remains unfinished, I can still pretend that one day she'll return to pose for me again." The brutal honesty of the response touched Emily in a way she hadn't expected. There was something profoundly human in the need to cling to hope even when logic said otherwise. "You still love her." It wasn't a question, but a statement. "Part of me always will. First love marks you in a way that never leaves." Emily turned to face him, and when their eyes met, she felt something change between them. The tension that had been growing during the last conversations materialized in the air, palpable and dangerous. "And me?" she asked with a courage she didn't know she possessed. "What do you feel for me?" Nathan took a step back as if she had physically touched him. "Emily, you can't ask that question." "Why not?" "Because you know why." But she approached him, eliminating the distance he had tried to create. "Are you sure I'm your daughter?" "No, I'm not sure of anything." "Then why can't we find out?" Nathan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that Emily was beginning to recognize as a sign that he was fighting with himself. "Because it's a risk I can't take. If you are my daughter, and if I'm not." They stared at each other, and Emily could see the conflict in his eyes, desire fighting against moral responsibility, attraction facing social taboo. "Emily," he said with a hoarse voice, "you don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do. I'm asking you to stop treating me like I'm a child. I'm 19. I know what I want." "And what do you want?" The question came loaded with implications, and Emily felt her heart race. She knew she was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed, but discovered she didn't care. "I want the truth. About everything. And I want to stop pretending I don't feel anything when you look at me that way." Nathan closed his eyes, as if in physical pain. "What way?" "Like I'm her. Like you're seeing my mother when you look at me." "That's not how I look at you." "Then how?" He opened his eyes and faced her with an intensity that made her tremble. "Like you're the second chance I never thought I'd have. Like fate is offering me an opportunity to fix all the mistakes I made in the past." Emily felt her legs weaken. There was so much pain in those words, so much repressed need that she could barely breathe. "This isn't about my mother," she whispered. "It's about us." "It can't be about us. You don't understand the implications." But Emily had already approached close enough to feel the heat emanating from his body. She raised her hand and touched his face, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. "Then explain the implications to me." Nathan covered her hand with his but didn't push it away. "If you are my daughter, this thing we're feeling is obscene, wrong on every level. And if I'm not?" "If you're not," he hesitated, "if you're not, then I'm betraying the memory of the woman I loved most in life, falling in love with someone who is half my age." Emily felt something contract in her chest upon hearing the words, falling in love, but forced her voice to remain steady. "And which of the two options scares?" "You more?" Nathan stared at her for long seconds, and Emily could see the exact moment when he stopped fighting against what he felt. "The second," he admitted, with his voice almost inaudible. "Because it means I'm being disloyal to the only woman I swore to love forever." Emily moved closer, until only a few inches separated their bodies. "Maybe loving another person doesn't mean being disloyal. Maybe it just means you're alive." Nathan took a deep breath, and Emily felt the movement of his chest against hers. "Emily, if we cross this line—" "I know," she interrupted, "but maybe it's time we stop being afraid of what might happen and start living what's happening now." And then, before either of them could reconsider, Emily rose on her tiptoes and kissed Nathan. The kiss started hesitantly, almost like a question, but when he didn't pull away, Emily deepened the contact. She felt him tremble against her, his hands moving to her waist almost involuntarily. For a moment, they completely lost themselves in each other. Emily had never been kissed with such intensity, such contained need. She could feel 20 years of loneliness and regret in the hands that held her, 20 years of repressed love in the way he responded to her touch. But then, as suddenly, as it had begun, Nathan pulled away. "No," he said, taking several steps back. "We can't do this." Emily felt as if she had been slapped. The heat of the moment dissipated instantly, leaving only confusion and humiliation. "Why?" "Because I'm 46, Emily. Because you could be my daughter. Because this is madness in every way." The words hurt more than she expected. Emily composed herself, trying to regain her dignity. "I understand," she said, with the firmest voice she could manage. "It was my mistake." "Emily, it wasn't anyone's mistake. It was—" "You don't need to explain. It's clear that you're still in love with my mother, and I'm just, I don't know, a convenient substitute." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Then why are you rejecting me?" Nathan ran his hands over his face, clearly tortured. "Because I need to. Protect you. From me, from this situation. From all the mistakes I made in the past." Emily grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "You don't need to protect me from anything. You need to decide if you want to live in the past or in the present. And apparently you've already made your choice." "Emily, wait." But she was already leaving the studio, walking quickly toward the front door. Nathan followed her, but didn't try to physically stop her. "When can I see you again?" he asked, when she reached the door. Emily turned, and he could see tears of humiliation shining in her eyes. "I don't know if you should. Maybe it's better to leave things as they are. Please, we need to talk about this calmly when we're not so—" "Confused? Attracted to each other? Making mistakes we'll regret?" Nathan didn't answer, and Emily interpreted the silence as confirmation. "Take care, Nathan. And finish the painting of my mother. Maybe that will help you move on." She stepped out into the cold Chicago night, leaving Nathan alone at the door of his mansion, with the taste of the kiss still on his lips and the certainty that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. But what he didn't know was that Emily had no intention of giving up so easily. During the walk to the bus stop, an iron determination grew within her. She had spent her entire life without answers about her past, and now that she had found someone who could clarify everything, she wouldn't let fears and social conventions prevent her from discovering the truth. Even if it meant forcing Nathan to face his own demons. Even if it meant discovering things about herself that she might prefer not to know. The war between them had begun, and Emily was determined to win it. Emily arrived home after midnight, her lips still burning from the kiss that Nathan had rejected. The humiliation burned in her chest like acid, mixed with a confusion of feelings she couldn't name: anger, disappointment, frustrated desire, and something deeper that frightened her. A sensation that she had lost something important before even fully understanding what it was. The building was quiet when she climbed the stairs, avoiding the steps that creaked. She needed time to process everything that had happened, to understand what it meant to have fallen in love with a man who could be her own father. Because that's what was happening, she knew. It wasn't just physical attraction or curiosity about the past. It was something much more dangerous and complicated. Emily opened the apartment door carefully, expecting to find Grandmother Margaret sleeping in the armchair as usual. But the apartment was empty. "Grandma," she called softly, thinking that perhaps she had gone to the bathroom. No response. Emily turned on the lights and searched through all the rooms of the small apartment. Her grandmother's bed was made, as if it hadn't been used. Her slippers were beside the armchair, but she was nowhere to be found. Panic began to form in Emily's stomach. Margaret never went out alone, especially at night. In recent months, with dementia advancing, she sometimes became confused about where she was, but she had never simply disappeared. Emily was about to go out to look for her in the streets when she noticed something different on the kitchen table. A white envelope that definitely wasn't there when she had left for dinner. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and found a note written in Margaret's shaky handwriting. "Emily, my dear, the time has come for you to know the truth I've kept for so long. He knows, and you need to know too. Look in the place where we keep memories. The answer is in the past I tried to protect you from. Forgive this old woman for not having the courage to tell you in person. Margaret." Emily read the note 3 times before the words really penetrated her mind. He knows. Who knew? Nathan. And what exactly did he know? The place where we keep memories could only refer to the old chest that was under her grandmother's bed, where Margaret kept old photographs, documents, and some family belongings. Emily had never fully searched through the chest. Margaret always said they were old things without importance. Emily knelt beside the bed and pulled out the heavy chest. The wood was worn by time, and the simple lock opened easily. Inside, she found piles of yellowed photographs, old certificates, and at the bottom, a sealed envelope with her name written in careful letters. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a typewritten letter, clearly old, and several photographs she had never seen before. The letter began, "My dear Emily." It was from her mother. Emily sat on the floor and began to read, feeling tears burning her eyes from the first words. "My dear Emily, if you are reading this letter, it means that Margaret has finally found the courage to tell the truth, or that circumstances have forced her to do so. I know you must be confused, hurt, perhaps even angry with me for leaving, but you need to understand that everything I did was to protect you. My real name is not Olivia Carter, it's Marina Santos, and before that, it was Bianca Almeida. I spent my adult life running from mistakes I made when I was too young to understand the consequences. Mistakes that could have cost not only my life, but yours as well. When I was 17, I got involved with dangerous people, drug dealers. Emily, I was a naive girl from a small town who arrived in Chicago thinking I could conquer the world. Instead, I became a drug courier between cities, not out of greed, but desperation. I needed money, and they offered what seemed to be an easy solution. But nothing is easy when it comes to dirty money. I fell in love with one of the men in the organization, a man who promised we could leave that life together. I got pregnant by him. When he found out, he beat me until I nearly lost you. That's when I understood I needed to run. I changed my name, got fake documents, and hid. That's how I became Olivia Carter. And it was as Olivia that I met Nathan Hayes. Emily, you need to understand, Nathan never knew about my past. To him, I was just a woman with a mysterious past, but not a dangerous one. He genuinely loved me, and I loved him too. Those were the happiest years of my life. But the past always collects its debts. They found me. They started following me, making threats. They discovered about Nathan, about you. And I knew I had 2 options. Confront these people and risk both of you dying because of me, or disappear again. I chose to protect you both. Emily, my beloved daughter, you need to know the truth about your father. It's not Nathan, although I wish it were. Your biological father is named Richard Morgan, and when he discovered I was pregnant, he tried to force me to have an abortion. When I refused, he beat me. That was the last time I saw him. Nathan never knew about the pregnancy. I left before telling him, because I knew that if he found out, he would try to protect me and end up getting involved in a war that wasn't his. I loved him too much to let that happen. If you're reading this letter, perhaps you have met somehow. Fate is sometimes cruel that way. It shows us what we could have had if circumstances were different. If this has happened, be kind to him, Emily. Nathan is a good man who has lost too much in life. And if you feel something for him, well, you're an adult now, and he is not your father. Don't let the ghosts of my past prevent you from being happy. With all my eternal love, your mother, Olivia Marina Bianca. Emily let the letter fall to the floor, her heart beating so hard it felt like it would jump out of her chest. Everything she had believed about her life, about her origin, about her mother, was a lie. Or not exactly a lie, but a version so simplified of the truth that it amounted to a lie. Her mother had been a fugitive. She had been involved with drug dealers. She had lived under false identities. And Nathan was not her father. With violently trembling hands, Emily picked up the photographs that were in the envelope. The first showed a young woman she recognized as her mother, but with blonde hair and a harder expression than any photo she had seen before. She was next to a dark-haired man, of dangerous appearance, who embraced her possessively. The second photo showed the same woman, now with dark hair, in a hospital. She was holding a baby, Emily, and her face showed a mixture of love and terror. The third photo made her gasp. It was Nathan, much younger, embracing her mother in front of what appeared to be the same mansion where Emily had dined in the last few nights. Both smiled with a genuine happiness that made Emily's heart contract. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Nathan and Olivia, our last happy day." Emily stood up, staggering, and went to the window, needing fresh air. The city of Chicago stretched out before her, millions of lights blinking in the darkness, millions of people living their lives with no idea of the personal tragedy that was unfolding in that small apartment. Nathan was not her father. They weren't committing incest by kissing, but they weren't free from complications either. He had loved her mother deeply, and Emily was the daughter of the woman who had left and destroyed his ability to love again. And now Margaret had disappeared, leaving only this note and these devastating revelations. Emily looked at the clock. It was almost 2 in the morning, too late to call someone, but she couldn't stay alone with this information. She needed answers, and there was only one person who could provide them. She picked up the phone and dialed Nathan's number. He answered, on the third ring, with a voice hoarse from sleep. "Emily? I need to talk to you now." "It's 2 in the morning. What happened?" "My grandmother disappeared and she left a letter from my mother." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Where are you?" "At home." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Emily hung up and ran to the bathroom, washing her face and trying to compose herself. When she heard the building's doorbell, she ran downstairs to meet him. Nathan was leaning against the car, with his hair disheveled and a worried expression. When he saw her, he immediately approached. "Are you okay?" "No." "I'm not okay." Emily handed him the letter. "Read this." Nathan read in silence, and Emily could see his expression changing with each paragraph. Surprise, pain, relief, confusion. A succession of emotions that mirrored what she herself had felt. When he finished, he carefully folded the letter and returned it to her. "Your grandmother knew all this?" "Apparently so. And you? Did you suspect anything?" Nathan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that Emily already knew well. "I knew Olivia was hiding something, but I never imagined it was something so complex." "Richard Morgan, do you know that name?" "No, but I can investigate." Emily showed him the photographs, and when Nathan saw the image of himself with Olivia, his face hardened. "I remember that day. It was a week before she disappeared. We had talked about traveling together, maybe getting married at the end of the year. And then she simply vanished." "Yes. Now I understand why." Emily put the photos and the letter in her purse. "I need to find my grandmother. We'll look for her together. She can't have gone far." They spent the next 2 hours searching the streets of downtown looking for Margaret. They visited hospitals, police stations, even some shelters for the homeless. Nothing. At 5 in the morning, exhausted and without clues, they stopped at a 24-hour diner for coffee. What if she doesn't want to be found? Asked Emily, absently stirring sugar in her coffee. What if she left the note and disappeared on purpose? Why would she do that? Maybe because she knew I would discover the truth and didn't want to be here to face the consequences. Or maybe because... Emily hesitated. Maybe because she's afraid of something. Nathan studied her tired face. Afraid of what? The people my mother was running from. What if they're still out there? What if they discovered about me? Emily, this was 20 years ago. Drug dealers don't forget, Nathan, especially when it involves money or betrayal. Nathan fell silent, clearly processing the implications. Do you think your grandmother might be in danger? I don't know. But she knew all of this and never told me. Why? What was she protecting? They finished their coffee in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. When they left the diner, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the Chicago sky with pink tones. Come to my house, said Nathan. You can't stay alone now. Emily wanted to argue, to say she could take care of herself, but the truth was that she was scared. Not just because Margaret had disappeared, but because of everything she had discovered in the last few hours. Nathan's mansion seemed different in daylight, less mysterious, more welcoming. He led her to a guest room on the second floor, spacious and elegantly decorated. Rest a little, he said. In the afternoon we can continue looking for your grandmother. But Emily couldn't rest. She stood at the window, looking at the perfectly tended garden, thinking about everything that had changed. In just a few hours. She wasn't Nathan's daughter. Her mother had been a fugitive involved with criminals. Margaret knew everything and had disappeared, leaving only enigmas. And she was in love with a man who still loved her dead mother. Around noon, when she finally managed to doze off a little, Emily was awakened by Nathan knocking on the door. Emily, I found something you need to see. She followed him to the office, where he had spread several documents on the desk. I spent the morning investigating. Richard Morgan is not a common name, and I managed to track down some records. Emily approached the desk. There were copies of certificates, newspaper clippings, and what appeared to be a police report. What did you discover? Richard Morgan died 15 years ago, murdered in a war between drug trafficking factions. Emily felt a strange relief. The man who had beaten her pregnant mother, who had tried to force her to abort, was dead. Late justice, but justice. And the group my mother was involved with? Most died or were imprisoned, but... Nathan hesitated. But what? There's a name that appears several times in the records, someone who was never caught, who is supposedly still active. Emily felt a chill down her spine. Who? Marcus Vega. He was the head of the organization at the time. According to police records, he swore revenge against everyone who betrayed him or stole from him. And my mother disappeared with a considerable amount of their money. It was never recovered. Emily let herself fall into a chair, the implications hitting her like punches, so they might still be looking for her. 4. Perhaps it's possible. But Emily, this was a long time ago. Maybe... Nathan's phone rang, interrupting him. He looked at the screen and frowned. Unknown number. Answer it, said Emily with a bad feeling. Nathan answered and put it on speakerphone. Hello? Male voice, deep and threatening, filled the room. Nathan Hayes? Who's speaking? Someone who knows the truth about Olivia Carter, or should I say Marina Santos. Emily and Nathan looked at each other, the terror evident in both their faces. What do you want? Asked Nathan, trying to keep his voice steady. I want what was always ours. The money that bitch stole. And now that we know about her daughter, we have a new form of collection. We don't know what money you're talking about. The man laughed, a humorless sound. Of course you do, just as you know where the old lady is who took care of the girl. Margaret, isn't it? Nice lady. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Emily stood up abruptly, her heart beating so hard it felt like it would explode. Where is she? She shouted at the phone. Ah, the daughter is there. Perfect. Hello, Emily. You're just like your mother. The same beauty, the same stubbornness. What do you want? $500,000. The amount your mother stole, adjusted for inflation over the last 20 years. You have 48 hours. We don't have that money, said Nathan. Then you'd better get it. Because if you don't pay, the old lady will die, and after that it will be the girl's turn. The call ended, leaving only the sound of Emily and Nathan's heavy breathing echoing in the silent room. Emily turned to Nathan, her eyes shining with tears of desperation and anger. "What are we going to do?" Nathan took her in his arms, holding her as she trembled. "We'll find a way to solve this, I promise." "How, do you have $500,000? "Not liquid. But I have the art collection, the house, and they won't wait for you to sell everything." Nathan tightened the embrace as if he could physically protect her from everything that was happening. "Then we'll find another way." "But Emily, I won't let anything happen to you, or to your grandmother." Emily moved away slightly to look him in the eyes. "Why? Why are you doing this for me?" Nathan touched her face tenderly. "Because you're not your mother, Emily. You and I—" He hesitated. "I fell in love with you. Not with the memory of Olivia, not with some fantasy second chance. With you." Emily felt something break and simultaneously rebuild inside her. Amid the chaos and terror, there was this impossible declaration, this admission that changed everything. "Nathan, I know it's complicated. I know there's an age difference, that our story began in a strange way. But what I feel for you is real." Emily rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, this time without hesitation, without fear. It was a desperate kiss, loaded with all the terror and all the passion that had accumulated between them. When they separated, both were breathless. "Let's save my grandmother," said Emily with an iron determination in her voice, "and then let's find out if we can have a future together." Nathan nodded, and in that moment Emily knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together. Because love, true love, wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It was about finding someone who was willing to fight by your side, even when everything seemed lost. And as the phone began to ring again on the desk, Emily and Nathan prepared for the most important battle of their lives. The phone rang again, and this time Emily answered before Nathan could stop her. "Where's my grandmother?" she demanded without preamble. The same male voice laughed on the other end of the line. "Straight to the point. I like that. Your mother was like that too, stubborn to the end." "Was? Is she dead?" There was a pause, and Emily felt her heart stop for a moment. "Olivia died 3 years ago, cancer. We found her in Tampa using another fake name, but she was already too sick to be of any use to us." The words hit Emily like bullets. Her mother was dead. She had died alone, far away, never having had the chance to meet the woman her daughter had become. "You're lying," she whispered. "I have no reason to lie about that girl. But she told us about you before she died. Said she had a daughter in Chicago, that you never really knew each other." It was touching. Emily felt tears running down her cheeks, but forced her voice to remain steady. "What else did she say?" "That she hid the money somewhere only you two would know how to find. Something about where dreams are kept. She thought she could fool us until the end, but we know you can find this place." Emily exchanged a desperate look with Nathan. Where dreams are kept. She had never heard this expression from her mother. "I don't know what you're talking about. You have 48 hours to find out. And girl, if you try to involve the police, the old lady dies right away. We have contacts in all the places that matter." The call ended again, leaving Emily and Nathan alone with the weight of the revelations. Emily let herself fall onto the sofa, tears flowing freely now. "She's dead," she murmured. "My mother is dead, and I never even had the chance to make peace with her." Nathan sat down beside her and pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry, Emily. I'm sorry for all of this. 3 years, she died 3 years ago, and I didn't even know. I spent entire nights imagining that one day she would return, that she would explain everything to me, that we could be a real family." Nathan stroked her hair, letting her cry against his chest. When the tears finally stopped, Emily pulled away and wiped her face. "Now I need to figure out what she meant by where dreams are kept. Could it be a reference to some special place for you two?" Emily shook her head. "We don't have special places. She abandoned me when I was 7, remember? Most of my memories are with my grandmother." "Then maybe it's a reference to something your grandmother knew. That's why they kidnapped her to..." Make sure you would cooperate. Emily stood up and began to pace back and forth across the room, trying to think. Dreams. Where dreams are kept. She stopped abruptly. The chest. What chest? My grandmother's chest, where she kept the old photographs. She always said that's where the family's memories and dreams were kept. Nathan stood up too. Do you want to go back to your apartment? It could be dangerous. Everything is dangerous now. But if there's a chance of finding something that can help us save Margaret, we have to try. They left the mansion in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The city of Chicago bustled around them, millions of people living their normal lives, unaware of the drama unfolding on the streets they traversed every day. Emily's apartment was exactly as she had left it, but now it seemed haunted by Margaret's absence. Emily went straight to her grandmother's room and pulled out the chest again. "Help me look," she said to Nathan. "Anything that seems out of the ordinary." They spent an hour searching through every paper, every photograph, every document in the chest. Emily was beginning to despair when Nathan found something. "Emily, look at this." He was holding a photograph that looked newer than the others. It showed Margaret next to an unknown man, in front of what appeared to be a small industrial warehouse. "Do you recognize this place?" Emily studied the image carefully. In the background of the photo, she could see part of a sign. "Storage bin." "It's a storage facility, but where?" Nathan turned the photo over. On the back there was an address written in pencil and a phrase, "For Emily, where we keep the dreams of a better family. Margaret." Emily felt her heart race. "That's it. My grandmother must have discovered where my mother hid the money." The address was in an industrial area on the outskirts of Chicago, more than an hour away. Emily took the photo and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" asked Nathan. "To Mart. Resolve this once and for all." "Emily, wait, it could be a trap. It could be. But it could also be the only chance to save my grandmother." Nathan followed her to the car. "Then let's go together. But Emily," he held her by the arm, "if it goes wrong, if something happens to me, you run. Promise?" Emily looked at him, seeing the determination and fear in his blue eyes. "Only if you promise the opposite. If something happens to me, you save Margaret and move on with your life." They kissed right there on the street, as if it were the last time, and maybe it was. The journey to the storage facility passed in tense silence. When they finally arrived, at the address, they found an abandoned industrial area with several empty warehouses and a general feeling of desolation. The specific storage unit from the photo was smaller than the others, with a faded sign that said Benton Storage, Self Storage. The doors were locked, but Nathan managed to force one of the locks. Inside, the space was dark and dusty. There were some boxes scattered around, furniture covered by canvas, and at the back, a small office. "There," said Emily, pointing to the office. They approached carefully. The door was unlocked, and when they opened it, they found Margaret sitting in a chair with her hands tied, but apparently unharmed. "Grandma!" Emily ran to her, but Nathan held her back. "Wait, this is too easy." He was right. The moment Emily approached Margaret, 3 men emerged from the shadows around the warehouse. One of them, older, with grey hair and a scar on his face, approached with a cruel smile. "Marcus Vega, I presume," said Nathan. "Very smart, and you are very predictable." Marcus gestured, and the other 2 men pointed guns at Emily and Nathan. "Did you bring what we came for?" "We haven't found the money yet," said Emily. "No? What a pity." Marcus approached Margaret and placed his hand on her shoulder in a threatening manner. "Perhaps your grandmother needs more incentive to remember where it is." "She doesn't know anything," shouted Emily. "Oh, but she does." Marcus crouched down to be at Margaret's height. "Don't you, old lady? Your daughter-in-law told you everything before she died, where she hid our money." Margaret, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke with a weak but determined voice. "Olivia already paid for her mistakes. You have no right over Emily. We have a right to what is ours, $500,000 adjusted." Emily looked around the warehouse, searching for some exit, some advantage. That's when she noticed something strange. One of the boxes at the back of the warehouse was positioned differently from the others, as if it had been moved recently. "The money is here," she said suddenly. Marcus turned to her, interested. "Where?" Emily pointed to the box. "There, my mother hid it here in the only place where she knew we would be safe, where my grandmother kept our things when we had nowhere to live." It was a lie, but Emily hoped it would be convincing enough to give her and Nathan a chance. Marcus gestured for one of his men, who headed for the box. The moment he bent down to open it, Nathan moved. He threw himself at the nearest man, knocking him down and taking his gun. Emily, acting on instinct, ran to Margaret and began to untie her hands. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Marcus shouted orders. Shots echoed in the confined space, and Emily threw herself to the floor, protecting Margaret with her own body. Nathan was fighting with one of the men, but the other had already recovered his gun and was aiming at him. Emily didn't think. She picked up a wrench that was on the floor and threw herself on the shooter's back, hitting him on the head. The man fell, but Marcus was already pointing his gun at Emily. "Enough!" he shouted. "Everyone on the ground now." Emily, Nathan, and Margaret knelt, hands raised. Marcus approached, his face contorted with rage. "You really think you can fool me? I've been doing this for 40 years. "The money really is here," said Emily, trying to buy time. "Prove it." Emily stood up slowly and headed for the box she had pointed out. With her heart beating wildly, she opened it. Inside, to her surprise, were several bundles of money wrapped in plastic, exactly what you would expect to find in money hidden for years. Marcus approached, his eyes shining with greed. Finally. But when he bent down to pick up the money, Emily noticed something he hadn't perceived. The bundles were deteriorated, clearly fake or worthless. Her mother had been smarter than anyone had imagined. "This isn't real money," she said. Marcus picked up one of the bundles and examined it. His expression changed from greed to homicidal fury. "You tricked me." "No," said a new voice from the entrance of the warehouse. "She tricked you." Everyone turned. At the door was a man in a suit, accompanied by several armed police officers. Federal. "Police, drop your weapons." What followed happened very quickly. Marcus tried to use Emily as a human shield, but Nathan threw himself between them. Shots echoed in the warehouse, screams, people running. When the dust settled, Marcus and his men were on the ground, some dead, others wounded and handcuffed. Nathan was fallen, with blood flowing from his arm, but alive. "Nathan!" Emily ran, to him kneeling at his side. "I'm fine," he said with a weak voice. "It's just a scratch." The man in the suit approached them. "Federal Agent Wilson, you're safe now." "How did you find us?" asked Emily. "We've been following Marcus Vega for months. When we intercepted the calls to you, we knew something was about to happen." Emily looked at Margaret, who was being attended to by paramedics, but seemed well. "And the money, the real money?" The agent smiled. "Your mother was smarter than any of us imagined. She returned the money to the authorities years ago anonymously. That's how we were able to start the investigation into Marcus's group." Emily felt a mixture of relief and pride. Her mother, in the end, had done the right thing. 3 weeks later, Emily was in Nathan's mansion, helping him change the bandage on his arm. The wound was healing well, and the doctors said there would be no permanent sequelae. Margaret had returned home, but this time with a professional caregiver that Nathan had hired. Her grandmother was more lucid since the events at the warehouse, as if the shock had temporarily cleared her mind. "You know," said Emily while adjusting the bandage, "we still haven't talked about what happens now." Nathan pulled her closer, enveloping her with his. "Good arm. What do you want to happen?" "I want us to stop being afraid of the past, of the future, of what people will think about our age difference." "And what else?" Emily smiled, the first time she had truly smiled since everything began. "I want you to finish the painting of my mother, but I want you to paint a new one too, a painting of me, not as the daughter of the woman you loved, but as the woman you love now." Nathan kissed her, a long and soft kiss that contained all the promises that didn't need to be spoken aloud. "And what about work?" he asked. "Do you intend to continue at the coffee shop forever?" "Actually, I was thinking about studying art. Maybe I have a good professor in mind." "Really, and who would that be?" "An older man, somewhat reclusive, who collects works rescued from shipwrecks." "Sounds interesting. Do you think he would agree to teach someone as stubborn as you?" Emily laughed, a sound that filled the mansion with a joy it hadn't known in decades. "I think so. Especially if that someone is willing to pay for lessons with homemade dinners and company during lonely nights." Nathan stood up and led her to the studio. There, the unfinished painting of Olivia was still on the easel, but beside it was a new blank canvas. "Ready for your first lesson?" he asked. Emily picked up a brush and dipped it in the paint. "I've always been ready. I was just waiting to find the right teacher." As they worked side by side in the studio, mixing paints and creating something new and beautiful together, Emily thought about her mother. Olivia had spent her life running, hiding, living in fear, but her choices, however painful they were, had led Emily here, to Nathan, to a chance at true love. "Do you think she would approve?" asked Emily, looking at the unfinished portrait of her mother. Nathan stopped painting and followed her gaze. "I think she would be happy to know that you found someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you represent of his past." "And you? Have you made peace with the past?" Nathan approached her, putting the brush aside. "The past brought me to you. How can I regret something that resulted in so much love?" Emily rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, savoring the taste of a new beginning on his lips. 6 months later, they married in a small, intimate ceremony. Margaret, with her mind clearer thanks to the new treatment, walked with Emily to the altar. In the front row, where the bride's mother should have been, there was only the finished portrait of Olivia, finally at peace. Emily wore her mother's necklace, but now it represented not an anchor that tied her to the past, but a bridge that connected who she had been with, who she was becoming. During their honeymoon in Florence, while visiting the studios where Nathan had learned his craft, Emily finally found the words to express what she felt. "You know what impresses me most about our whole story," she said, as they walked through the medieval streets of the city. "What?" "That it began with you paying me to have dinner with you, and it ended with me gaining a husband, a career, and a family." Nathan laughed and pulled her closer. "Best investment I ever made in my life. Even costing 500,000 imaginary dollars and almost getting us killed. Especially because of that, the best things in life always cost more than we expect to pay." Emily looked at the wedding ring on her finger, simple but perfect, like everything in her new life. "Do you think we'll be happy forever?" "I don't know about forever," said Nathan, stopping in the middle of the street to kiss her, "but I know we'll be happy for as long as we're willing to fight for it." And as the sun set over Florence, painting the sky with colors that rivaled any work of art, Emily Carter Hayes knew she had finally found her place in the world, not as the abandoned daughter of a fugitive, not as the granddaughter of a woman lost in her own mind, but as a complete woman, loved and capable of loving in return. The past had been painful, full of secrets and lies, but from it had been born a radiant present and a future full of possibilities. And that, Emily discovered, was the most perfect definition of love she could imagine. Years later, when they told their story to their children, they always ended it the same way. And that's how we discovered that sometimes you need to lose everything you thought you knew about yourself to find who you really are, and that true love is worth any risk, any pain, any sacrifice. Because in the end, Emily had learned the most important lesson of all, that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice, and she had chosen Nathan just as he had chosen her. And that choice, made every day, was what transformed two lonely people into an eternal love.